found another place to put that tank, and because that's the way they are. They gave the last one, we gave them to an elementary school, feeling that they needed it more than anywhere else. But we wanted the tank at Pastor George's church, where he had like 1,500 people every Sunday that walk there, and we wanted to make sure that they had fresh water. So there it is. Praise God. And Pastor George sends his thanks, which is an understatement. He is eternally grateful. And it's very rewarding to be a part of a church that does great things like that, as the Bible instructs us to do. So thank you all who gave to that effort. Okay, last week we looked at Nehemiah. We saw him depart from what has been a pretty straightforward memoir, detailing the process of repairing the wall around Jerusalem. Where did he start? He was a taste tester for the king. No particular skills required, only to stay alive after you take a few bites of food. But he was called upon by God to move 900 miles from the Persian capital to Jerusalem. Remember, this is a taste tester. Picks up everything and moves at the instructions of God to build a wall around Jerusalem, which needed protection. And we've been seeing why it needed that protection as we move along. He rallied the people to help. He got almost 100% cooperation. He saw opposition to the wall effort arise. Financial problems developed among the people who chipped in to help. And even the threat of war emerged during Nehemiah's efforts. And as Nehemiah tells his story, no sooner does he handle one serious problem that creeps up when another one pops up. So here we are in chapter 6, and overall, amazingly, less than 2 months have passed since Nehemiah arrived in Jerusalem. Less than 2 months. Things are happening very quickly. 2 weeks ago, Nehemiah chastised those with money who were taking advantage of the situation by loaning money to people in need because they were helping with the wall and unable to keep their farms going at the rate they used to. They were, the wealthy were acquiring more money, they were acquiring more property, they were even acquiring the children of those in need as slaves, and charging exorbitant interest rates, which Nehemiah termed to be usury. That was going on during this entire process, shamefully. And Nehemiah gained cooperation from all of them by even including himself with the list of offenders, because he had loaned people. And again, I believe it was not at an exorbitant interest rate, but he was profiting from their misfortune as well. Then Nehemiah departed once again from his list by telling us about the benevolent governorship that he had brought to Jerusalem. He started in King Artaxerxes' 10th year in this chronology. He had stopped the practices of former governors that helped themselves to food, helped themselves to tax money, and basically profited from the governorship of Jerusalem. Every evening he hosted 150 people for dinner, paying for it with his own resources, not tax money. And this, we found, followed the lead of King Solomon, who hosted even more as king of Israel. A model for leadership that God gave us that we studied last week. Nehemiah eliminated taxes and other burdens on the people of Jerusalem. He was an example of the benevolent leadership that Christ modeled and Christ encouraged leaders to adopt, rather than the egotistical, selfish, megalomaniacal leaders that they come to expect and even respect in those days. We looked at cross-references last week and found that Nehemiah was indeed a leader that Christ encouraged us all to be, and that Solomon modeled for us. So, as I looked at what I was going to talk about today. I started with just a few verses, and God said, speed it up a little bit. So we're going to look at all of chapter 6 today. So let's go ahead and read chapter 6 and see what the Lord has for us today. Now when it was reported to Sanballat, Tobiah, and Geshem the Arab, and to the rest of our enemies that I had rebuilt the wall, and that no breach remained in it, although at that time I had not set up the doors and the gates, then Sanballat and Geshem sent a message to me, saying, Come, let us meet together at Chepharim in the plain of Ono. But they were planning to harm me. So I sent messengers to them, saying, I am doing a great work and cannot come down. Why should the work stop while I leave it and come down to you? They sent messages to me 4 times in this manner, and I answered them in the same way. Then Sanballat sent his servant to me in the same manner a 5th time, with an open letter in his hand. In it was written, It is reported among the nations, and Gashmu says that you and the Jews are planning to rebel. Therefore you are rebuilding the wall, and you are to be their king, according to these reports. You have also appointed prophets to proclaim in Jerusalem concerning you, a king is in Judah. And now it will be reported to the king according to these reports. So come now, let us take counsel together. Then I sent a message to him saying, Such things as you are saying have not been done, but you are inventing them in your own mind. For all of them were trying to frighten us, thinking, They will become discouraged with the word and it will not be done. But now, O God, strengthen my hands. When I entered the house of Shemaiah, the son of Deliah, son of Mehethabel, who was confined at home, he said, Let us meet together in the house of God within the temple, and let us close the doors of the temple, for they are coming to kill you, and they are coming to kill you at night. But I said, Should a man like me flee, and could one such as I go to the temple and save his life? I will not go in. Then I perceived that surely God had not sent him, but he uttered his prophecy against me because Tobiah and Sanballat had hired him. He was hired for this reason, that I might become frightened and act accordingly and sin, so that they might have an evil report in order that they could reproach me. Remember, O my God, Tobiah and Sanballat, according to these works of theirs, and also Noadiah the prophetess, who were trying to frighten me. So the wall was completed on the 25th of the month of Elul in 52 days. When all our enemies heard of it, and all the nations surrounding us saw it, they lost their confidence, for they recognized that this work had not been accomplished with the help of our God. Also in those days many letters went from the nobles of Judah to Tobiah, and Tobiah's letters came to them. For many in Judah were bound by oath to him because he was the son-in-law of Shechaniah the son of Ara, and his son Jehohanan had married the daughter of Meshullam the son of Berechiah. Moreover, they were speaking about his good deeds in my presence and reported my words to him. Then Tobiah sent letters to frighten me. Well, we can see from these verses that the enemy, led by Sanballat, is changing course. Having failed in all their other efforts, the wall was essentially done. There were no breaches in it. Now, the gates were not mounted yet, but that was all that remained to be done. So, at this point, Jerusalem is still accessible to all, as it had been. But that won't last much longer, and the enemy is getting desperate. And their next attempt, their next tactic, is to attack Nehemiah's person, an attempt to depress the people working for him and working for the protection of Jerusalem. Now, we've established at this point that Nehemiah is a pretty sharp guy, very intelligent. Surprisingly, for someone who came from a position that really required no intelligence. But it didn't take much intelligence to see through this trap they were trying to set for him. Sanballat and Geshem invite him to a meeting at Chepharim in the plain of Ono. Now, these two, Sanballat and Geshem and Tobiah, have been walking around Jerusalem freely, and they want to continue to be able to do that. So it's kind of unusual for them to all of a sudden invite Nehemiah to a meeting elsewhere. Here is the distance of 37 miles between Jerusalem and Ono, and Jemerim, where they invited him, is probably around here, about 25 miles along that route. It's quite a distance. So they're basically asking Nehemiah to take several days, 25 miles to 25 miles back, to meet with them. Nehemiah's answer, I am doing a great work and I cannot come down, is not boastful. In the lexicon and the idioms of the day, it basically means, I've got a lot of work to do, I can't do that. Of course, he knows it's just a trap anyway. Remember, at this time, Nehemiah is the governor. He's the go-to guy for every problem. He is enormously busy at this point, especially considering the fact that all he's got to do is hang the gates, and there are many of them, to finish the project that he came to do. Now put yourself in Nehemiah's position at this point. He's a very important man. And it's human nature, as I can personally attest, that when you're in a position of importance and people are coming to you because they know you're the only one that can do what they want done, it becomes an exercise to prevent ego from making decisions for you. This was a prestigious request. Nehemiah, you are the only one who can help us with what we want to do, and we want to meet with you because no one else can do what you can do. So there was a temptation for Nehemiah to take this meeting and be the powerful, prestigious person that the invitation claimed he was. This is why Paul gives us an admonition in 1 Corinthians 10:12 that we all have to be aware of. Therefore, let him who thinks he stands take heed that he does not fall. In other words, if you think you're a big deal, you better be careful because you will fall if you allow your ego to separate you from God. Now, Sanballat, Geshem, and Nehemiah go through this 4 times. 4 times they send messages to him inviting him to a meeting 25 miles away. Finally, the 5th time comes in the form of an open telegram. And it's interesting, Nehemiah makes sure that we know that it was an open telegram. This is a typical telegram at the time, sealed with 3 wax rings. That's sealed so that whatever's contained in the telegram can only be read by the person that's intended to read it. Now, Sanballat sends it open because he wants others to read it. It's difficult to imagine a messenger going 25 miles with an open letter for the governor and not reading it. He had plenty of private moments to do that. And not only is that difficult to imagine, but it's difficult for him to imagine that he not only read it, but he shared it with anyone he felt comfortable sharing with it along the way. Who knows how many people knew of the contents of this message? And of course, the message was intended to attack Nehemiah's reputation. It basically accused him of treason, planning a rebellion of the Jews. That's why they needed the wall. And once that was taken care of, he would take over as king. Pretty juicy stuff. And just to be sure, Sanballat adds, and just in case you're wondering, we're going to send a letter to the king, let him know. I love Nehemiah's response in verse 8. He says, such things as you are saying have not been done, but you are inventing them in your own mind. And to give you an interpretation of that, liar! That's all he's saying. Liar. He's saying it very tactfully, of course. But but it was a lie. And then Nehemiah shares with us another of his many quickie prayers. But now, O God, strengthen my hands. Strengthen my hands. He's not asking for physical strength. He's asking for the strength to endure this attack on his reputation. And not only that, but he's asking for everything he's done up to this point to protect him from these false accusations. Now, other than tactfully calling Sanballat and Geshem liars, he doesn't really defend himself at all against a charge of treason, which in just about any country in the world carries the penalty of death along with it. Well, Nehemiah goes right from this exchange into continuing his narrative, which basically means he didn't consider this threat worthy of any more of a defense. So, Sanballat, Geshem, and Tobiah embark on yet another avenue to attack his character. They go to the temple itself. To go after his reputation, they enlist priests and prophets to do their dirty work. Shocking. Really is. Shemaiah, the son of Deliah, the son of Mehetabel, who was called out as a secret informer, a spy within the walls of Jerusalem. This is the environment that Nehemiah has to deal with. In fact, not just a spy, but a priest who has agreed to be a spy for an area that's so obviously sinful. You think that's surprising? But the strategy has worked and continues to work. You guys might remember I told you a couple weeks before Christmas that I was on a driving job a Saturday, and there was another woman who was with me taking a track team to college, and along the way we had a chance to talk, and she asked a spiritual question, and I was able to minister, but only for a few minutes. Well, during our Christmas party, she came and she wanted to continue that conversation. Praise God. So I ministered to her some more, and we were talking, and I was talking about how evil can influence people with total lies. And I used an example. This is tragic, but it's humorous in a way. I used the example of the attack on Kavanaugh in the Supreme Court. I said, look what the opposition did to this man's reputation, or tried to do to this man's reputation, with nothing valid. And she shook her head and said, oh, that guy's so guilty. Can you imagine? I knew that my job of ministering to her was that much more difficult. So the strategy that Sanballat and his minions are working continues to work. We all may have felt, I certainly have, we all may have felt attacks to our reputation that were totally unjustified. And they may work with some. But God is showing us through Nehemiah's example here how to deal with these attacks. Yes, they may work with some people, but we can't worry about that. We just have to continue to protect our reputation by doing the right thing, time and time again. The temptation will be to do something to appease those who think we're guilty of things that people are trying to convince them we're guilty of. But that won't get us anywhere. And Nehemiah doesn't fall for that. Now, Shemaiah came to him. Shemaiah the spy came to him. This is where Tobiah is from. Just to remind you, Ammon, here's Jerusalem right here. Shemaiah comes to him, obviously having talked to Tobiah, and proposes that Nehemiah hide in the temple. They're going to come to kill you. They're going to kill you at night. But the temple is a place That's safest of all. You should hide there. In fact, commentaries say that Shemaiah was proposing he hide in the most holy place of the temple. Now, I'm not convinced that's what he was saying. That would have been a terrible idea. Anywhere in the temple would have been safer than what Nehemiah did. Well, here's the prayer that Nehemiah says at the suggestion. The temple is a place only priests were allowed to go, according to Numbers 18:7. And yet here Shemaiah is proposing that Nehemiah go in there just to hide. Now, Shemaiah makes his alliances obvious by making such a proposal. Why would a priest suggest that Nehemiah break God's law to protect himself? It was obvious to Nehemiah that the effect on his reputation, his character, would have been very destructive had he taken Shemaiah's proposal. If someone, a priest, was willing to break God's law for this, he lacked the respect for God's law and was obviously not doing God's work. Merely suggesting Nehemiah use the temple, anywhere within the temple, let alone the most holy place, was obviously to Nehemiah, because he stayed close to God and listened to God. It was obviously a nefarious attempt to destroy his reputation. Clearly a bad idea. Would have made Nehemiah look like a coward. Can you imagine all the people who were constantly coming to Nehemiah for help, saying, "Where's Nehemiah? I need some help." Oh, he's hiding in the temple. How would that have looked? Wasn't a look that Nehemiah was going to allow himself to have. Some of you may remember King Uzziah in Kings. He went into the temple where only priests were supposed to go, and he tried to do the work. He burned some incense, and work reserved for priests. And before the priest's very eyes, he was struck with leprosy. This is in 2 Chronicles 26, 16 through 21. Nehemiah, as we've been saying, was so highly regarded that his enemies saw a need, one of their last remaining ideas, a need to destroy his reputation in order to build themselves up with the people, and perhaps yet stop the temple from being protected by a completed wall with gates and locks and everything. And in verses 15 and 16, we see the answer Nehemiah gave to his enemies. He spoke through the accomplishments God gave them, the wall, gates and all, finished in 52 days. Remember, this is a 39-foot-high wall, 8 feet thick, 2.5 miles around, an amazing accomplishment. The cranes alone required to lift the stones to complete that 39-foot wall. Amazing to think about. It was such an amazing accomplishment, this is how God works, such an amazing accomplishment that his enemies saw that when it was completed in 52 days, they knew that the God of Israel was with them. Nehemiah gives us this crescendo in verses 15 and 16. What a great couple of verses to throw in his biography. Then he finishes the chapter with some yet more treachery, this time with Tobiah stepping forward and taking the lead instead of working behind the scenes. Tobiah the Ammonite. And we can see from these last few verses that Tobiah was influential within the community as well. He was the son-in-law of Shechaniah, the son of Ara, and both Tobiah and his son married into influential Jewish families. His son married the daughter of Meshullam, who was mentioned in Nehemiah 3:4 as one of the primary workers of the ritual stepping in to help build the wall. So Nehemiah could not be ignorant or ignore the relationship between Tobiah, his enemy, and even the priesthood. These were all sources of information for Tobiah. And Nehemiah had to be aware that he had this leak going on and had to be strategic about it, as he was. Looking at Nehemiah's last prayer in chapter 6 indicates the conspiracy against him was pretty extensive and included known prophets. Nehemiah 6:14, there we go. Remember, O my God, Tobiah and Sanballat according to these works of theirs, and also Noadiah the prophetess and the rest of the prophets who are trying to frighten me. So we can see Tobiah had tremendous influence with supposed people of God, prophets and priests, working against Nehemiah. A pretty powerful opposition. And again, these are pretty serious accusations and pretty powerful people attacking Nehemiah. And we don't really see a defense from him other than the tactfully worded accusation that his enemies are liars. Nehemiah relies entirely on God for his defense, as he should. He had a reputation for effectiveness. He comes in to a place that had been unprotected for more than 100 years, and in 52 days he fixes the problem. The entire Jewish community, minus a few paid spies and informants, respects him as governor, as someone who worked a miracle, as God's servant. His faith is strong. He prays throughout the chapters that we've explored. Even those quickie prayers, right in the middle of the crisis, he'll throw a prayer to God, meaning he doesn't take his mind off God ever. He is always reliant on God in every situation. He knows the hearsay put out against him will fall on deaf ears if only he clings to God. In the case of most attacks, that is the best way to deal. Continue to do the right thing. Continue to lean on God. And he will provide you the protection that you can't possibly devise on your own. The one thing that stands out to me at this point in the narrative is that Nehemiah is a man of character. A man whose reputation has resulted from his faithfulness. Numerous times he could have folded under the pressure and done what his enemies wanted him to do to take the pressure off. But he knew that was the wrong thing to do. He knew that that would be against God and remove God's blessing that came time after time after time. How many of us have done projects that we knew were godly, but the attacks made us question that. Attacks that we could have gone against God's wishes to ease the pressure. Nehemiah refused to do that. Praise God. Now I keep forwarding to this picture of Will Rogers, and now we'll get to that story. A man of character. Will Rogers was known for his laughter, but he also knew how to weep. One day he was entering the Milton H. Berry Institute in Los Angeles, a hospital that specialized in rehabilitating polio victims and people with broken backs and other extreme physical handicaps. Of course, Rogers had everyone laughing, even patients in really bad condition. But then he suddenly left the platform to go to the restroom. Milton Berry followed him to give him a towel, and when he opened the door, he saw Will Rogers leaning against the wall, sobbing like a child, distraught by the pain that he witnessed, even though he made them all laugh. He closed the door, and in a few minutes, Rogers appeared back on the platform as jovial as before. Now, I have a few snippets about character that I researched, along with some other stories. Here's a quote from Gamaliel Bradford. In great matters, men show themselves as they wish to be seen. In small matters, as they are. A talent is formed in stillness, a character in the world's torrents. And that is Goethe who said that. There it is. A number of years ago, great number of years ago, before I was with Lockheed, Douglas Aircraft was competing with Boeing to sell Eastern Airlines its first big jets. War hero Eddie Rickenbacker, the head of Eastern Airlines, reportedly told Donald Douglas that the specifications and claims made by Douglas, the Douglas company for the DC-8, were close to Boeing's on everything except noise suppression. Rickenbacker then gave Douglas one last chance to outpromise Boeing on this feature. After consulting with his engineers, Douglas reported that he didn't feel he could make that promise. Boeing's noise suppression was far superior, and he had to admit that. Rickenbacker replied, "I knew you couldn't, I just wanted to see what you'd say." Character may be manifested in the great moments, but it is made in the small ones. It's Phillips Brooks. Character is not made in crisis, it is only exhibited. And that's anonymous, but how true. I know we all can feel that firsthand. And lastly, by one of my favorite folks, I've read books on him, and he's a fantastic individual, a man of God, and also one God gave amazing success in the college basketball world. We have a lot of basketball fans here. Lane, who's here in spirit, I guarantee you. Great college basketball fan, and no coach enjoyed more success than John Wooden. John Wooden, who was in demand wherever he went and took time to talk to people, even though he didn't have the time as we define it. John Wooden said, "Be more concerned with your character than with your reputation. Your character is what you really are, while your reputation is merely what others think you are." Think about those quotes on character as we pray. Dearest Lord and Heavenly Father, we thank you so much for this story of Nehemiah. A story that we studied today involved something that we all face, and we all face frequently, and that is attacks on our character as we embark on large missions for you. The nature of the things you give us to do is that they'll come upon opposition. Opposition that might surprise us. As I was ministering to this fellow driver, I had no idea she had already been negatively influenced by people who were committed to doing the wrong thing. Interesting to think about that, Lord. Who listens to what? What channels do they watch that encourage them to do the wrong thing? And how do we turn them to you? Lord, I pray that you help me with this individual. And I'm guessing that everybody listening to this prayer now, including those who listen on YouTube, have someone in mind that they've been frustrated time and time again as they try to get these people to turn to you. When Christ often said, "Those who have ears to hear," well, everyone he's speaking to had ears. But what he was saying is, those who are open to a gospel message, and the majority are not. Help us, Lord, to know the time and place to get someone to open up and consider you and what you did for us when you gave your life for us on the cross. You didn't have to do it unless you wanted to fulfill God's plan that involved allowing people like us into heaven someday, where we could enjoy a time that you designed. And the reason why you created us in the first place is to enjoy communion with you without disease, without death, without pain, with pure and solid joy. Lord, we all look forward to that. Elaine is enjoying it as we speak. So comforting to know that our sister, whom we loved, who we spent time with, and who will have a meal together thanks to her in a few minutes, like that, does anything else really matter? Thank you, Lord, for giving us that. In Jesus' name, amen.
Thank you, Pastor. Please stand with me as we sing our